In this video, I'm going to be comparing Antigravity to Claude CLI and Codex, see which one's better. Now, I will say Claude and Codex are going to be running inside of Cursor as just an IDE, but I'm not going to be using really any Cursor features. I just wanted to kind of show it there. The goal is to kind of understand how well it does. I've seen all of these different metrics on Gemini 3, the new model that Google just launched, on what could be best about it, how it's absolutely beating everything, but realistically, I want to see how it does with my work and my situations. And what am I going to be doing to test that? By seeing how well not only does it understand the goal of a paper that I wrote and put into preprint about psychometric pipeline analysis of large language models. Don't worry, if you're curious what that means, I have a whole other video diving into it as well as a couple articles. But long story short, I took a bunch of personality tests, more advanced tests called psychometric tests. Psychologists use it. And I aimed it and I created a data pipeline that allows me to aim those tests at all the big AI models out there and get a whole bunch of data to kind of understand their personality. I want to see how well it can actually take my code base that I created and refactor it into a more modular pipeline, if not an app, for other political scientists and individuals to use. And it's a quite a large one, lots of prompts, lots of thought. This is over a year of work. I've been testing models on this continuously. I've had it do the same prompts for the last 2 years, seeing how well it's able to navigate all the weirdness of this code, because this is more than just hard code, it's conceptually odd, which is a really great test to see how these models are actually developing. Now, in order to test it, I want to test Gemini 3, Claude 4.5 Sonnet, as well as 5.1 Code Max from Codex. Now, I'm not testing Claude to Codex as much, but it's more to compare how Antigravity does in a space where there's already a lot of tools like this out there. For this environment, I have Claude Code on the right, essentially looking at my entire code base, and I have Codex on the left. I also have Antigravity pulled up, looking at the same exact file. What I'm gonna do is actually not have it edit this file. I'm going to have it create an entirely new folder with an entirely new set of code and essentially try to see how the models can take this code, make it more modular, and if anything, turn it into an app that's much easier to use. My reasoning behind that is in my paper, I want political scientists, social scientists, all these individuals who have a technical barrier in researching this stuff to be able to just have a tool they can put their own scales or questions or survey responses in and see how the AI actually responds to it so we can really understand the bias or the direction these models are going. Now, I will say I already have a designed version that I prefer that I created once before, and I'll be able to compare it to, my personal design as well, not just the other AI, but I have a sneaking suspicion that they're going to do quite a good job. So to start off with, I immediately gave it a prompt. Please read and understand this ethics engine. And I gave the same prompt to everyone else, including Gemini 3 in Antigravity here. Now, I will say I've done this once before, a couple times before, and one of the biggest problems I have is right inside of the main code base, I have a whole bunch of YAML JSON objects that are all the questions from the questionnaires. And these are essentially prompts, and I need them to be accurate and exact, because if they're any different than the original scales, I'm losing all of that academic fidelity, right? The last 30 years of research on these questions and the way the words are put together. And the models will just shorten it down and put a 3 dots as if oh, you'll add it later. Now, right off the bat, I already like Claude's response better than Codex's. It's much easier to read. Again, the reasons I like it aren't necessarily technical reasons. So there might be technical reasons that Codex is better, but from a personal use and everyday processing of it, it's just more formatted, it's much more robust, it's letting me understand that it does have its context. Now, this could be a problem if you're trying to limit tokens, right? This is much more concise from Codex. Just, this is what it is. These are the natural steps I would take to reiterate. Versus Claude, who really dives in, thinks about the research implications, thinks about the output files, all of these processes. Now, whether or not this is more valuable, again, Claude's response is more valuable, is up in the air for me to kind of dive into. But as of right now, based on its understanding and how it broke it down, I would trust Claude Sonnet 4.5 more than Codex in this situation. But again, the goal isn't to compare these two is to compare anti-gravity. Now, I will say the first time I ran this was right when anti-gravity launched, and it was kind of hard. I kept getting error rates. I think their servers were getting overloaded. So I waited a day or two, and now I'm re-recording the video. This time, I didn't have any issues with errors or anything like that. Recent update might have fixed a lot of problems. Now, immediately, the difference right off the bat is that Gemini inside of anti-gravity creates a task list. Now, Claude and Codex will create task lists within their chat. Anti-gravity with Gemini 3, specifically Gemini 3 Pro, I don't think I mentioned that, actually creates this task list that you can come in and review or even edit and add comments to, which I find wildly interesting. Again, I'm a very novice with anti-gravity. I haven't watched any tutorial videos. I've just dove right in and tried to click on stuff. So if you want to see a tutorial video on how to use anti-gravity, I recommend checking someone else's video or wait about a month until I post one myself. These comments will actually affect how Gemini reads and understands the tasks, which is extremely valuable. The fact that I get to not edit the entire task list, you're going to change things, but just make small nuanced shift to its directions to ensure it's on the right path and not following too far the wrong direction. There's also a walkthrough file that it decided to make, which is really interesting. It went through and analyzed it, and my reasoning behind liking Claude is now amplified here. Google has been waiting a while. They bought Windsurf. They took their time to dive into this. So right off the bat, I was expecting a pretty decent UI interaction interface, especially when the entire IDE is built around the model. It's kind of cheating in some ways, but it's kind of to be expected that it would look nice. And again, right here, it looks very nice. And it went through and did this feature verification process where it went and looked and verified that the features I explained were actually there and implemented. It didn't notice any bugs. I actually do have some bugs for the Llama and DeepSeek kind of implementations. I think if I asked it to find them, it might notice them, but right here, it just said implemented. It didn't say it was perfectly implemented, so maybe it just didn't feel like it was, worth the time. It is shorter than Claude, which can give some worry here. I'm not entirely sure, but it is cleaner in that aspect. I had to tell it to continue here again from that error rate, but that hasn't happened again since I've done that, and it went right through. I can go and see its thought process a lot cleaner than if I was inside of either of these. There's a way to watch the thought process of it and hit Control R, but it's a lot less clean. Again, these are UI arguments. This has nothing to do with the performance of the model yet, as we haven't gotten to that full point, but I think UI and interaction is becoming exponentially more important as the software and the creation of software becomes easier to produce. I think the differentiation between a lot of companies 5-10 years from now is how much people enjoy interacting with it, both from a UI, UX perspective, but also from like an ethical and moral perspective. Now, for the next step of this process, I actually created a relatively simple prompt. Now, usually I take a lot more time on my prompts, especially when I'm doing coding with agentic systems, describing specific file names, structures of files, the types of code and updates I want to use. But in this case, I want to see how well all of these can capture intent with as much context as possible. So the prompt I said is, okay, amazing. Now that you understand this, I have a goal for you. I want you to create an entirely separate folder, task 1, then in that folder, create a clean code base that is Python files that are modular. Each section of this Jupyter notebook could be a .py file, and I want to be able to easily navigate it myself and to update changes or add scales parameters. Once that is done, I would like a simple but easy to use UI that lets me run this pipeline. I have an env file with all my keys. I will paste into the folder later. I purposely misspelled things as well, just to see, as I've noticed that sometimes the quality shifts when you misspell things, and I want to see how well it can handle that. It's a very subtle shift that requires thousands of data points to notice, but I have noticed it. This is what I'm sending to all of them. I'm making sure they are on the highest version, and something important to note that I'm going to do for a future video is I can use Sonnet 4.5 in here, and I can use the GPT OSS, which is a kind of open source model that OpenAI created. So there's another option of having this template, but with a different model, which might be interesting. I also sent the same thing to Claude and Codex. Now, Claude is immediately asking for, bash commands, so I'm gonna go ahead and give it. Also with Claude, I specifically said ultra think hard because that makes sure it's in its highest process. And right off the bat, it gives a to-do list, much like the other ones, and is immediately giving me some sort of project architecture, right? Codex, on the other hand, is immediately saying, cool, I'll do it. And it's actually asking questions first, which I'm not against, right? That's actually kind of nice. You should be doing that. In this case, I was wanting it to just run and go for it. I'll just say your choice for all. I don't want to input too much of prompts and give Codex an unfair advantage as the other ones are kind of going out and making it do it in there. So I'll let that happen there. Gemini 3 inside of Antigravity is actually creating an implementation plan as, again, a separate file. I really love this. Feel this vibe of bouncing back in between them, the file being out here rather than a to-do list in the conversation. It's something we do naturally or we do on purpose with like Claude MD files or PRD files. However, this is built it in to automatically open up in that way. It's the little things that matter when you're diving into this level, right? Because all of these models are going to do a great job, but at the end of the day, it's the way in which you interact with them that matter. So inside the implementation model, it gave me some ideas for user review, right? Modular code base. It did a pretty decent job. I like this kind of idea. It gave an API section, a core section, an analysis section, UI section, as well as requirements in .main, which is actually kind of similar, I think, to what Claude did, right? Config, core, analysis, UI. There's not really an API section in this one. I'm assuming it's going to put it under models as well as core, right? API clients. I kind of like the idea of API being a separate section because eventually that's going to be MCP. And so I would like a whole section that is only MCP. Now for Codex to the left here, it gives me kind of outlining the structure, all this stuff, talks about tasks, but there's not really any information, right? Like I have no idea what it's doing right now. And this has been a problem, I think, for Codex for a while. I will say Codex does ask more questions and can be very good at planning on its own, so it doesn't need as much interaction. But I'm a very big fan of seeing the entire process and what's in there. And you can open this and dive into its process a bit more. But again, right off the bat in Antigravity, I have this beautiful file that I can come and look through. I can look at its plan, I can understand it, I can review it. That's the flow. This is a flow that I would want with coding with AI assistants. It's like working with another individual. It's clean and in front of me. I can see the injection points for my own knowledge. So I'm gonna go ahead and click proceed here, and I'm actually gonna run through the rest of the process. What ended up happening is Claude finished extremely fast. I mean, way before anyone else did. Right now, Codex is still going through and it's just failing terribly trying to talk to PowerShell. It might be a permissions issue. This might be something I did, not giving it full admin aspect. I don't want it to be like, hey, Codex sucks. I think there's a lot of situations there. I could do better prompting specifically for Codex and its environment. I haven't been using Codex so much because I feel like the other ones do what I want and my intention better. Also, Google is still going along right now. It's chugging, just generating. It's doing a lot of work. It's showing me, and again, what's really nice is the UI is just so clean. It's so clean. I can see it has the nice little buttons. I can click to open it up very quickly. It's just very, very nice. It's coming through. I can accept all these changes, but let's go ahead and take a dive into what we think Claude is doing. So it looks like starting from the bottom, right? Project complete, woo! They did a folder called Ethics Engine, architecture of 5 packages and 20 modules. So config, core, analysis, UI. Config has all the configurations, all that jazz. 2 user interfaces, which is interesting. Gave me a CLI, which that's super nice. That's actually really nice. I didn't ask it to do that, but having a CLI to be able to just run and test things and force it sounds really good. And it decided to use Streamlit. Almost every model uses Streamlit to create a UI, generally speaking. So we'll see some good documentation, readmes, features, chain logs. Created some key improvements over the notebook. Whether they're improvements, we'll find out here shortly. Tells me some getting started, some setup processes. common tasks made easy. That's interesting. It decided to come up with tasks that it thought needed to be cleaned up. Change prompts, right? Let's see, edit config / prompts. That's interesting. Modify templates. Yeah, I mean, that's nice. Kept all the features plus new features. Wow. File locations reference. Need to modify something. Here's a quick reference file. Pro tip, start with the UI. It's the easiest to learn. Test with runs. Use lists. Amazing. Next step. So, I mean, that's cool. I think the most important things to take from this is it decided new features to add on its own and how to actually automate those tasks. And most importantly, it was the fastest, right? The Codex still is doing whatever ridiculousness it's doing. Gemini is waiting for me to accept. I would prefer something to take longer and get it right. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and open up the UI from Claude while these guys are running and see what it looks like. Okay, well, this was much more annoying a process to even get it to this screen. Essentially, the first thing it did, one common thing that humans do as well as people. So if you actually look at my original survey aggregator, the thing that I created, I put all the prompts into these JSON objects because it's easier to pull an ID and create this list, right? They're lists, right? JSON objects isn't even really the right way to put it either. And what it would do is it'll put the quotations in the wrong order or miss a quotation, causing a basically syntax error in all of these. Now, I've done this personally myself plenty of times, and the AI consistently has a problem with these large lists like this. So I've had this problem for the last year on trying to get anything to work with this. And Claude's solution was just to get rid of most of it and basically make a version of it and tell me to copy it and paste it in later, which honestly is actually a pretty good solution, right? There's no point automating and creating all these scripts to try to get it in there if it's struggling so hard when I could just paste it, my original ones right in there. On top of that, it had some issues with the actual UI as well and registering my env file for my API keys. But eventually we got it up, and it's a Streamlit dashboard, right? And it did a decent job. I haven't ran to see if it works well. I'm still looking through the logic. It seems to click. It seems to give me the options of choosing different scales, choosing different prompt styles, which is interesting there. I don't believe it's gonna really work too well without some editing, and this has been the case for the last year. I've never been able to get a model to one-shot or two-shot my code base into something modular too easily without some, obvious prompting and whatnot. Most of the code, as I was reviewing it, looks okay. Let's dive into Codex real quick. Now, I was gonna show you Codex's. He kind of hijacked Claude in here and put its own and created a series of .pys that are okay, I suppose, but it kind of got confused, I think. Didn't realize it should be in a separate engine. Meanwhile, Claude both recognized it needed to create a separate one, even though Google had already made one, the Gemini 3. So right now, I'm just gonna stop touching Codex. For the cases of this, don't like it. It's the loser, just kind of overall already. Yeah, I've never really liked Codex as much as the other ones anyway. I think it can be very powerful, but not on this one. And now finally, Antigravity with Gemini 3. This by far took the longest out of all of them, like significantly so, a good 30 minutes extra. Already extremely promising. So immediately recognized needed to create a separate folder from the other AI on its own. It created its analysis area. It looked like it got the scoring well. It looked like it did the API calls pretty well. I haven't ran it yet, so we'll find out there. The core looks great. The most impressive part is I'm not seeing any JSON errors. So right off the bat, all of these were copied over perfectly. As of right now, we'll find out here shortly if that's the case. And these scales look exactly like how I would have organized them and how I would have coded them. It handled the reverse scoring. These true values are true values in my original one as well. It did the proper compiling of the list as well. Super nice there. But the thing that's blowing me away right now, and again, I haven't seen it, is the UI. It said, nah, Streamlit's cool, but let me actually just build an entire JS and CSS front end. And it went all in. I mean, it created this entire massive set of like triggers and sections. And honestly, it's gonna take me a while to like dive in and actually understand what it was trying to create here, because this is a massive build from what I think it's doing. And then it also created a FastAPI front end to be able to do it. Now, this looks pretty, but does it work? So I'm gonna go ahead and run it for the first time, and we're gonna see if it actually was able to do this insanely monumental task. I was looking through its thought. I kind of dig it. Again, same prompts. I haven't told it to do any of this. I only gave Gemini the first two. Only Claude and Codex did I have to prompt at least a little extra for it to even finish the task. But we're gonna find out here shortly if Gemini was able to do it in 2 single prompts. Okay, Google wasn't perfect at first either. I had to fix a couple things, and I just threw some errors in there to see if it would fix it on its own, and it did. It did very quickly. It wasn't that challenging, but it basically had an import error to be able to get one of them to run, and then also had for the backend to run, and then also it didn't correctly configure the post CSS imports and the packages, so it was just a kind of crappy HTML page rather than anything else. However, that was kind of quick to fix, like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and this is what it looks like. And actually, it's very clean. It seems to work very well. It seems to have pulled my API keys no problem. It seems to have pulled kind of all of the different texts as well, and I double checked the scales, the personas, those are always proper and spot on, which that's the most impressive part for me, because no model has been able to do that yet. So that's pretty good, honestly, as far as it goes. And then in terms of running and starting the process, it does take about an hour to run it. It hasn't even gotten into the first kind of task, which it should have already been doing. It's a pretty fast kind of pipeline. Let's see. Oh, okay. Hold on. Wait. It looks like it's actually getting the runs. Okay here. Processing survey. All right, we'll see. But this is already better than any other model up until this point. I still think it's going to fail. I still think there's going to be some problems compared to my original pipeline. However, this is significantly better than both Claude and OpenAI Codex. So that's a great improvement to see. Again, I've been running this test and this type of process on this same data pipeline for well over a year now with all the previous models. One important thing to note too with the Antigravity is it shows me now all of these tasks as well that it was doing as a separate task file rather than inside of the actual chat. And then it also had a walkthrough file that is really clean and is a lot nicer than what you see with Claude or just a basic .md file, right? And again, I can comment on all of this and go through reviews. Like the fact that it went through all of this effort means that now I don't have to go and do a separate conversation, create the FastAPI, create the front end, and then connect it. Versus with Claude and Codex, they just use Streamlit, and I can push Streamlit to, like a GitHub and host it on Pages or something like that. But realistically, I'm gonna want to have a proper front end and UI for everyone to use. So the fact that it already went through it, it used Tailwind, which I liked. It used all this type of aspect that is pretty decent. So honestly, I'm pretty happy with it. It seems like it ran it partially through. I'm not really happy that how fast that went. That should have taken 20-30 minutes. It also shows 0% there. So there's something wrong going on there that I think is interesting. And I don't think is working as it should be. As far as getting to this step, that's pretty good. You would need a lot more prompting and moving. Let me give an overall opinion on these, just in terms of chunking and time. Right, none of them successfully were able to completely do what I wanted in 1 or 2 shots. I've never had a model be able to do it within reason. I'm sure if I made like a larger paragraph and identified it, I've gotten models get really close with just some minor tweaks here or there. But overall, the thing I'm asking it to do is not something even like an entry level or mid-level kind of programmer would have an easy time doing, even with AI. So this idea of modularity and refactoring for a database that is kind of weird and complex in a way that it's simple. It's not a lot of code, but it's weird how the code interacts. Still, all models are challenging with this kind of stuff, especially when it comes to kind of, my scales and the JSON. Gemini absolutely beat and won both in terms of transferring my JSON objects over properly and accurately. I believe it also won in terms of least amount of effort to get the UI running. Claude was significantly faster, and I think that speed would allow me to kind of catch up to Gemini. So as in how quickly I'm working with the Sonnet 4.5, the amount of time it would take Gemini to get there would be probably the same of how much me just prompting and getting Sonnet to kind of be where I want it to be for the UI and everything. So I'd say they tie in terms of time to success. Codex definitely lost in this instance. Again, for my friends who use Codex out there, there is ways you could code this. I'm sure you're thinking about it right now to be able to get this to work, but not for me in this case. Overall, it's very clear. It's very clear to me. I'm gonna be working in anti-gravity from now on, because the other big aspect that we haven't even talked about, I can use Sonnet 4.5 in anti-gravity, right? So my favorite model that works well can be used right inside of here, and immediately it's probably going to use all of the things that I like about anti-gravity. The idea that it's cleaner, it's easier to work with, it's organizing things better. And then I can just flop over to Gemini 3 if I really want to. I haven't even touched on the idea of breaking things down, the other tools, this kind of agentic movement use cases, the controllability of how you're actually able to explore it, the fact that anti-gravity and Gemini can actually explore your app. And so I can actually have it open up the UI and look at it and see what's wrong and code with it. I didn't even jump into any of those features. Without being a heavy user of anti-gravity, I can already say this is my IDE of choice for agentic coding already. I made some kind of rough posts on LinkedIn because it was hard to access it. There were some authentication errors the first week. But it seems like they solved those within no time. The idea that I can touch artifacts here and easily see them, it's user-friendly in a way that I think is required for the actual flow and speed for agentic coding, vibe coding, which I don't really like calling it that, but that's essentially what it is, to be, to get the most bang for your buck. That's anti-gravity versus Claude versus Codex. A little bit of cursor in there. Obviously, I could be using it better. Google really is up in their game, and they took their time to come out with something nice, and I'm excited to see where it goes over the next year or two. I'm sure everyone's going to clap back with something, but we'll see how it goes. But enjoy the rest of your evening, day, morning, whenever you're watching this, and till next time, my friends, much love.